Here we go. 5 advanced idioms for IELTS speaking. Are you ready? Let's do it. Hello, it's Keith from the Keith Speaking Academy, and it's so nice to be with you again. How are you? Great. So in this lesson, I'm going to give you 5 advanced idioms for IELTS speaking, and I'll show you how you can use them in the test and in your everyday spoken English. I'm also going to answer a few questions that students have asked me about idioms. That'll be interesting. And finally, at the end of the video, I want to tell you about a new book and a new online course coming soon that I have created all about idioms. So stick around to find out more about that. Right now, let's get into the first idiom. Okay, number 1, to fall on deaf ears. And this is where you say something and it is ignored or no one listens to it. Okay, for example, Sarah asked her kids to stop playing and do their homework, but her request seemed to fall on deaf ears as they continued playing on their phones. Yeah, sure, Mum. Yeah. Just a minute. Yeah. Oh dear. Fall on deaf ears. Now, to fall is to fall. Deaf means you cannot hear. So if somebody cannot hear, they are deaf. And your ears are these, right? Ear, ears. Notice it's to fall on deaf ears, plural, right? Deaf ears. Now we can use this when you are giving advice or suggestions or warnings to other people, to your family, to your friends, to maybe your bosses or your colleagues. Would you give advice to your boss? Maybe, yes. Or the other way around, when they give you advice and suggestions, or the government gives advice and you ignore it. Okay. For example, we could say with the boss example, right? I told my boss about the problems with this new procedure, but my words fell on deaf ears. Okay. The way we use this is we have the object plus the verb fall in different tenses on deaf ears. That bit doesn't change. On deaf ears. Okay, so typically we can say my words fell on deaf ears, advice, suggestion, warning, my request fell on deaf ears. We can change the tense of fall, and notice it's always ears, on deaf ears. What we can't say is I fell on deaf ears. No, not I, it's the words or the request fell on deaf ears. Final example, our teacher told us to study hard, but her warning fell on deaf ears. All of the students ignored her. Oh, poor teacher. Now, recently a student asked me, and he said, Keith, are idioms really important? It's a good question. And I said, yes, I think they are. They're really important. You know, I think we use them quite a lot in our spoken English. Not all of the time, but they are very common in spoken English. Some of them we use in writing, but not so much. If you're preparing for IELTS, then they're important because if you look at the IELTS band descriptors, that's what the examiner uses to evaluate you. It says for a band 7, uses some less common and idiomatic vocabulary, with some awareness of style, collocation, and appropriate use. So you do need to be using less common idioms. You can make some mistakes, but the more accurate, the better, and the higher the level, especially if you want a band 7 and above. Common idioms might be like, I'm over the moon, I'm happy. Less common, like the 5 I'm showing you today in this lesson, these will probably be less common. In addition to that, I think idioms are important because they are colourful. They make native speakers smile and they're going to help you understand a lot of language. If you're watching films or listening to the news or reading newspapers, you'll see a lot of idioms, and that will help you. Finally, of course, they're fun. They're great fun. You do need to practice a lot, but I recommend that you listen to them more than you use them to build up your understanding of when to use them, right? That appropriate use. On that note, let's dig in to number 2. All right, number 2 is to twist your arm, or to twist someone's arm. And this means to persuade someone to do something that maybe they don't want to do. Okay. For example, I didn't want to go to the party, but my friend John twisted my arm. So in the end, I went. Okay. To twist is to twist like a top. A lot of bottles, right, have a twist off or a twist on top. Oh, need to buy some more balsamic vinegar. And so to twist your arm, it's actually this. It's to twist your arm behind your back, which is very painful. Do you remember at school? Lots of kids, especially boys, do that a lot. Oi, twist your arm. That's literal. Of course, as an adult, we don't do that. We're much more civilized, and it's idiomatic. It just means to convince or to persuade someone to twist your arm. Okay. So how do we use it? Well, you can change the tense to twist, and you can change the pronoun, the your, my, his, her, arm. Arm here is singular. You remember to fall on deaf ears was plural, but this is just one arm, right? So you can say, I twisted your arm. I convinced you. She twisted my arm. She convinced me, right? She persuaded me to go, right? You can say she twisted my arm to go. My advice with idioms, though, is to keep it simple. Try and keep the idiom in one clause, right? I didn't want to go, she twisted my arm. If the simpler you keep it, the less likely you are to make mistakes. That's my advice. A final example here. I wasn't sure about buying that new jacket, but my wife twisted my arm, and now I love it. Great. Next one. Oh, here's another question from a student. A student asked me, Keith, how should I learn idioms? I know they're important, but how should I learn them? My advice is to learn them by topic. Right? Look at different topics you need to talk about, especially if you're preparing for IELTS, and get idioms you can use to talk about that topic. Here's the problem. If you go on the internet or look at any book about idioms and you look for a topic like idioms about food, you get idioms that use related words, but they don't help you talk about the topic. Idioms for food, you're going to get like 2 peas in a pod. To go bananas, it's a piece of cake. Those don't help you talk about food, right? Like 2 peas in a pod means 2 people are similar. That's not talking about food. It's just peas is a kind of food. So that's interesting, but it doesn't help you talk about it. What would be much more useful is an idiom like to wolf down, which means to eat quickly. In the mornings, I'm always in a rush, so I have to wolf down my breakfast and then go to work. That's much more useful. So the thing is, what you need is somebody to go through all the idioms, put them into these topics to talk about the topic, and then that will really help you. I've got some good news. I've done it. I've created a book and an online course. Not with all the idioms, because there are thousands, of course, right? But I've got a book with 50 idioms for IELTS speaking and an online course with 150 different idioms for your IELTS speaking and everyday English. And they help you talk about the topic, right? Useful idioms for that topic. I'll tell you more about that a little bit later. For now, let's get into idiom number 3. Number 3 is to put your cards on the table. Now, this means to be honest with someone about your true feelings or about your plans for something. For example, during the meeting, the manager asked everyone to put their cards on the table and share their real opinions about the project. This comes from the cards. It comes from playing cards, right? These kind of playing cards that we have. These are super small. Playing cards or poker cards, and you'll know, right, that if you play poker, you'll know that when you get your cards, you don't show your cards, right? You keep them secret. If you put your cards on the table, everybody can see you're showing your true feelings or plans, right? Absolutely. Do you know that trick? Let's try that trick. Choose a card. Go on, pick a card. Pick a card. Any card. I'm not looking, right? And I'll guess what it is, right? Shall I tell you what it is? It's the 2 of hearts. How did he do that? So, put your cards on the table. You can use this when you're, for example, if you're preparing or you're talking about preparing a surprise party, a surprise celebration, or about feelings with people when you want to reveal your true feelings. Or maybe at work, discussing goals, plans, intentions. All of these are good situations where you may want to reveal something important or maybe a secret as well. For the use of this idiom, we can change the tense of the verb. So put can change tense. And the pronoun, my, your, his, her, right? I put my cards on the table. Yeah. He will put his cards on the table. Give him time. Okay. Notice it's always in the plural. Cards, always in the plural. And the table. It's always the table. So you can't say, I put my cards on my table. No. I put my cards on the table. Right? There is a similar expression. You can also say to lay your cards on the table. It's also used. Final example, I didn't know how she felt about me, so I asked her to put her cards on the table, and then she told me that she really liked me. Great, that's it. By the way, there was another question the other day from a student, and they said, what exactly are idioms? And are they the same as phrasal verbs? Again, another very, very good question. So an idiom is normally a short expression, right? They're very common in spoken English, more than writing. And they usually have a literal meaning, but also an abstract meaning. So often the sum of the words has a different meaning from the individual words. For example, it's not my cup of tea literally means this cup of tea is somebody else's. But figuratively or idiomatically, it means I don't like it, right? Rock music is not my cup of tea, means I don't like it very much. So idioms can include phrasal verbs. Some phrasal verbs are idiomatic, right? He passed away means he died. Or he kicked the bucket also means he died. However, other phrasal verbs are just very literal. Can you take out the rubbish? It literally means pick up, take out the rubbish. I need to throw this bottle away. It's literally throw away. It's not idiomatic. So it depends. How do you know if an idiom is spoken or written? It's very simple. If you hear somebody say the idiom, it's spoken. If you see it written, it's written. The majority are spoken. Bear that in mind. Some can be written, but not that many. All right, next idiom. Next idiom coming up. Right, the next idiom number 4 is part and parcel. And I love this idiom. So when something is part and parcel of another thing, it means it's a necessary part of that. It can't be separated. For example, studying is part and parcel of being a student. You can't avoid it. You have to study to get good grades. Okay. So it's where something can't be separated. It's a necessary part of it. It's great for talking about jobs or work or study or learning things. For example, making mistakes is part and parcel of learning a language. It's great for talking about relationships or marriage. You know, for example, getting angry is part and parcel of being married. True, right? So we say the way to use it is A is part and parcel of B. Okay, A is a necessary part of B. A is a noun, often a gerund, is part and parcel of B, which is a noun, often a gerund, right? Studying, the noun, is part and parcel of going to university, also the noun in the gerund, okay? When it comes to pronunciation, this is a binomial, so part and parcel, the and becomes un. Part and parcel, part and parcel. And it's part and parcel of something. The of becomes of. So A is part and parcel of B. Can you say? Good. Get that stress. A is part and parcel of B. Great. The origin of this idiom, apparently it's a legal term many hundreds of years ago. So part just meaning part, parcel meant an essential part of the whole. So it's a part and an essential part of the whole thing. Now it's just used idiomatically in everyday English, right? For example, in Manchester, it rains a lot in Manchester. It's part and parcel of everyday life there. Another question I wanted to share is students often ask, which idioms should I learn, especially for IELTS, speaking and writing. The problem is there are thousands of idioms and you want to learn as many as you can. I would just be aware there are different kinds of idioms. So there are what we call proverbs, and these are kind of a part of idioms, but proverbs often have a message. Things like every cloud has a silver lining. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. A stitch in time saves nine. And these, I wouldn't really use these in IELTS speaking because they're kind of moralistic. They're like giving a message and they're not that common. And in fact, often when we use them in conversation, we only say one part. We often say every cloud. We don't say every cloud has a silver lining. You might do, but often we say every cloud and people understand what you're going to say. So be careful with those. Also be careful with old-fashioned idioms like it's raining cats and dogs. It's very old-fashioned. We don't really use that anymore. If you look at a good online dictionary, so the Cambridge Online Dictionary, Oxford Learners Dictionary, Collins, all of these are good. They normally should tell you if an idiom is old-fashioned or obsolete. Again, between speaking and writing, if you hear somebody say an idiom, you know it's spoken. If you've seen it in writing, you know you can use it in writing. Also be careful of regional idioms. I mean, some idioms are only used in the UK, some are only used in America. Just be careful of that. I don't think it's a big problem nowadays because there's so much cultural interconnection, right, through Netflix and pop culture and songs that most people understand most idioms nowadays amongst native speakers. So it's not a big issue, but it's good to be aware that if a phrase like "it's not my cup of tea," it's a very British idiom, not used as much in the United States. Okay, next. Okay, idiom number 5 is to be on the same page. And this means to think in a similar way or to agree about how to do something. For example, before starting the project, the team met to make sure everyone was on the same page about the goals. And this, I guess, is quite logical, right? I mean, if you imagine you've got your project book and I'm on page 6 and you're on page 12, we're not going to be discussing the same thing. We're not going to agree. So you need to be on the same page as me. That's literal, but of course, we're using it idiomatically in a general way to agree about something, right? For the way we use this, you could say, I am on the same page as you, but normally we use it for plurals for more than one person. So typically we say, we were on the same page. They were on the same page. Everybody was on the same page, right? It's always the page, and it's always page singular. Remember, fall on deaf ears was plural. Twist my arm, singular. On the same page, singular. So that chunk on the same page doesn't change. Okay? Only the verb to be can change, right? So for example, it's important for parents to be on the same page when setting rules for their children. Similar expressions are to be on the same wavelength, or to sing from the same song sheet, or to sing from the same hymn sheet. It's a more religious one, but it means to be on the same page, to be agreeing about what you're going to do. Great. Fantastic. So you've got 5 advanced idioms for your IELTS speaking and your everyday English to become a confident speaker of English. My final piece of advice is that in order to be confident when using idioms, you need to be sure about how to use it and in the right context. And you get that from listening and listening and listening to the idioms being used lots of times before you use it yourself. And then to practice and be ready to make mistakes, right? Making mistakes is part and parcel of learning a language. It's great. It's okay. I think idioms are more difficult than general vocabulary because the grammar is unpredictable, right? You know, how do you know it's to be on the same page or to be on a same page, on deaf ears or deaf ear? How do you know? You must learn each one by heart, right? By heart, memorizing each one. And then just practice listening to how it's used. And that's why in my upcoming book, 50 Idioms for IELTS Speaking, and after that, there's an online course, 150 Idioms for IELTS Speaking. I break down these idioms that are really useful for your spoken English. Some can be used for writing, but I break down how to use it, what it means, how to pronounce it, and give you different examples so you can build up your confidence to use these idioms when talking about a particular topic. So that's coming in the next month or two. Keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes peeled. Nice idiom. Keep your eyes peeled for that. Look on the website, in my social media. I'll be letting you know when it comes, right? In the meantime, keep practicing, keep going, enjoy your study, and thank you so much for watching. I hope that my advice today won't fall on deaf ears. Enjoy your study, and I'll see you, hopefully, in the next video. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.